Royal Guard breaks down after Prince Louis finally explains why he's terrified of Camilla's son. He had a way of making everyone around him smile, even in the most serious of situations, and his playful spirit often brought a rare sense of warmth to the otherwise formal palace halls. Family members, tutors, and the royal staff often spoke fondly of how the young prince could charm anyone with his innocent curiosity, his bright eyes observing the world with a mixture of wonder and intelligence far beyond his years. Yet beneath that sunny exterior, there was a side of Louis that few had seen, an anxiety that grew quietly, invisibly over time, like a shadow lurking just out of reach. At first, the signs were subtle. During family gatherings, he would occasionally pause, hesitate before walking into a room, or linger near a trusted adult rather than joining his peers immediately. On casual visits to royal events or official functions, he sometimes seemed distracted or restless, fiddling with his fingers or quietly humming to himself in ways that suggested discomfort. While some might have brushed these actions off as normal childhood behavior, shyness, or perhaps tiredness, the adults close to him knew something deeper was happening. His tutor noticed that he was unusually careful about where he stepped, sometimes avoiding certain hallways or looking nervous when certain people were nearby. The guards observed that Louis occasionally looked around, almost as if searching for a safe place or a familiar face to lean on. Louis' anxiety, however, was not random. Over the months, it had become clear that it was connected to one person, Camilla's son. Though he was only a child like Louis, there was something about the way Camilla's son carried himself that unsettled him. He seemed confident to the point of arrogance, and in Louis' eyes, he often appeared critical, judgmental, or dismissive. Even in casual play, Louis felt as though he had to measure every word, every action, lest he become the target of subtle teasing or disapproval. These interactions, seemingly small, left impressions that grew over time, building a silent tension that Louis struggled to articulate. The young prince found it increasingly difficult to express his feelings. He didn't want to appear weak or complain, and the royal rules that dictated behavior made it even harder for him to speak up freely. Royal life demanded composure, respect, and a constant awareness of appearances. Children were expected to behave with decorum, even when faced with uncomfortable situations, and the pressure to maintain this image weighed heavily on him. He often went to bed at night thinking about how to navigate the next day, worrying about what might happen when he had to face Camilla's son or appear in public events where the other child would be present. His parents noticed small changes in his behavior. Where once he would eagerly greet visitors or participate in games, he now sometimes hesitated at the doorway, searching for reassurance before stepping forward. During dinner or family discussions, he occasionally fell silent, choosing to observe rather than join in, a clear sign of a mind preoccupied with unease. Even close friends at school noticed that he sometimes seemed distant or withdrawn. These were children who knew him for his bright and playful personality, and the contrast was troubling. It was as if a part of him was closing off, hiding behind walls he didn't know how to tear down. The palace staff, devoted to the young prince's well-being, tried to help him in small ways. They ensured he had trusted companions nearby during events, offered encouragement in moments of hesitation, and gently reminded him that he could seek support whenever he needed it. Yet despite these efforts, the anxiety persisted. Louis found himself constantly calculating how to act, what to say, and even how to walk, all in ways that would minimize the chance of confrontation or criticism. Each interaction, no matter how small, became a test of courage, leaving him drained and anxious. One afternoon, during a quiet stroll through the palace gardens, Louis confided in his favorite royal tutor. He spoke in soft, hesitant words, describing how he sometimes felt nervous around Camilla's son, how the other child's presence made him anxious even in harmless situations, and how he often wished for a moment of peace where he didn't have to worry about what might happen next. The tutor listened patiently, offering kind words and reassurance, reminding him that it was okay to feel frightened and that sharing his worries was a sign of strength, not weakness. It was a rare moment of openness, a window into the internal struggle Louis had carried alone for so long. The anxiety wasn't limited to social gatherings. It began to affect the prince's daily routines. He became more cautious about joining group activities at school, sometimes pretending to be busy or occupied with tasks, just to avoid interactions that might make him uncomfortable. During formal training sessions, he occasionally lost focus, his thoughts drifting toward what awaited him at home or in the palace corridors. Even moments of leisure, reading, drawing, or playing quietly, were tinged with a quiet awareness that something outside his control could disrupt his peace at any time. Despite these challenges, Louis tried to maintain his cheerful facade. In public, he laughed and played as expected, charming the crowds and fulfilling the duties expected of him. Yet the mask he wore was not without cracks. Observant adults noticed the occasional flicker of hesitation, a nervous glance, or a sudden quiet that seemed uncharacteristic of a child who had always been confident and carefree. They understood that while Louis had learned to manage his fear in public, it remained a significant force in his life, shaping his thoughts, actions, and interactions. The palace itself, though grand and filled with history, sometimes felt overwhelming to the young prince. The long hallways, ceremonial rooms, and formal events could amplify his unease, especially when he knew Camilla's son would be present. What might seem like minor discomfort to an outsider was, for Louis, a constant navigation of potential challenges and subtle judgments. The weight of expectation, both from his family and from the public, added another layer of pressure, making each day a careful balance between courage and caution. Louis' anxiety, while challenging, was also shaping him in unexpected ways. He developed a keen sense of observation, noticing details about people's behavior, tone, and expressions that others might overlook. He became thoughtful about his choices, learning how to respond diplomatically and tactfully even in situations that made him uncomfortable. These skills, born from fear, were quietly building resilience, teaching him that while he could not control every situation, he could control how he responded to it. Yet, the shadow of fear remained, persistent and often exhausting. There were nights when Louis lay awake, replaying moments in his mind, imagining alternative actions, and worrying about the consequences of things he had said or done. He longed for understanding, for someone who would truly listen without judgment, and for moments of freedom where he could simply be himself without fear. The adults around him, though caring and attentive, sometimes struggled to fully grasp the depth of his feelings. This gap left Louis feeling isolated, even within the family he loved dearly. Through all of this, the young prince maintained a glimmer of hope. He trusted that, eventually, he would find a way to face his fear, to understand it, and perhaps to overcome it. He held on to the knowledge that there were allies, his tutor, his personal guard, and a few trusted family members, who would support him when he needed it most. These quiet moments of reassurance provided a lifeline, a reminder that he was not alone, even when the fear seemed overwhelming. As the months passed, the tension within Louis grew, but so did his awareness of himself. He began to recognize patterns in his anxiety, identifying triggers and understanding the situations that made him feel unsafe. While he was still cautious and often nervous, he also started to develop strategies to cope, seeking help when needed, speaking quietly to trusted adults, and finding small ways to assert control over his environment. These steps, though gradual, were signs of a young prince learning to navigate the complex emotional landscape of royal life, a journey that was both challenging and formative. By the end of this period, it was clear that Louis' experiences were shaping him in profound ways. The anxiety he felt was real, tangible, and deeply personal, but it also fostered resilience, empathy, and insight beyond his years. It was a reminder that even in the gilded halls of royalty, children could face fears as real and consuming as those in any other life. And while Louis had not yet confronted the source of his anxiety directly, the awareness he had gained, combined with the support of those who cared for him, was laying the foundation for the eventual steps he would take toward courage, understanding, and personal growth. The day finally came when Prince Louis could no longer keep his fear bottled up. Despite his young age, he understood the weight of what he had been holding inside. For months, he had been carrying the anxiety, the worry, and the quiet dread that seemed to shadow his every step whenever Camilla's son was nearby. Though he tried to distract himself with play, reading, and lessons, the unease had grown too strong to ignore. That evening, after another tense encounter at a royal gathering, he found himself sitting with his personal guard, someone he trusted more than anyone else in the palace. The guard had always been kind, attentive, and patient, and Louis felt that this was the only safe moment to reveal his feelings. At first, the words came slowly. Louis fidgeted with the edge of his sleeve, his small hands twisting nervously as he struggled to put his emotions into words. The guard knelt beside him, offering quiet encouragement, reminding the young prince that it was okay to speak freely, and that he would be listened to without judgment. This gentle reassurance gave Louis the courage to begin, though his voice trembled and he had to pause several times to collect himself. I don't like it when he's around," he said softly. "Camilla's son, he makes me feel small, and I don't know what to do." The guard, though composed, could see the genuine fear in Louis' eyes. This was no ordinary childhood worry. This was a deep and persistent anxiety, the kind that quietly eats at confidence and happiness. He listened intently as Louis explained, bit by bit, the experiences that had led to this fear. He described moments at events where Camilla's son had made remarks that felt sharp or dismissive, moments where the other child's laughter or teasing had stung more than anyone might realize. Each recollection was like a small wound reopening, and the guard's heart ached to see the young prince in such distress. Louis spoke about the times he had felt mocked, even if subtly. He recounted a visit to a garden party where he had accidentally spilled a cup of juice. While most children would have been met with simple understanding, Camilla's son had chuckled and whispered in a way that made Louis feel embarrassed and ashamed. It was not the words alone, but the tone, the expression, and the way others seemed to notice that had left him anxious and fearful. He remembered walking away, hiding behind the shrubs, wishing he could disappear, wishing for a moment where he could simply be free of scrutiny. The guard gently reminded Louis that such feelings were valid and that being frightened did not make him weak. He reassured the young prince that everyone, even adults, experiences fear, and that sharing these feelings was an important step toward overcoming them. Louis nodded, his voice quivering as he continued. He described more incidents, times during lessons or playdates when Camilla's son had seemed competitive, dismissive, or unkind. Each situation left Louis feeling vulnerable and uncertain, unsure of how to react without causing trouble or drawing attention to himself. As Louis spoke, the guard began to understand the depth of the child's fear. It was not merely the occasional teasing or disagreement. It was a consistent pattern of behavior that left the young prince feeling powerless. The guard's thoughts turned to the ways in which he could help protect Louis without overstepping the boundaries of protocol or drawing unnecessary attention. His mind raced with strategies, but more than that, he felt a profound empathy for the young prince who had carried so much alone. Louis' fear was compounded by the pressures of royal life. In most households, children might have confided in parents or older siblings and found support easily. But in the palace, appearances mattered. Every interaction was observed, every reaction could be interpreted, and the rules of decorum made expressing fear or discomfort particularly challenging. Louis felt trapped between the expectations of the court and his own need for safety and reassurance. This tension made each encounter with Camilla's son a trial, leaving him anxious before, during, and even after events. He spoke about how he sometimes tried to avoid eye contact, how he would linger near adults he trusted, and how he constantly calculated what to say and how to behave. Each decision, however small, required careful thought. Simple actions, like moving from one room to another or choosing where to sit during meals, became weighted with stress. Even leisure activities were affected. Louis sometimes hesitated to join games, fearing that Camilla's son might notice and interfere or worse, laugh at him. The guard listened silently, allowing Louis to pour out his heart without interruption. Though it was painful to hear, the guard recognized the courage it took for the young prince to speak so openly. The depth of Louis' fear was clear, but so was his desire for understanding and protection. It was a moment of vulnerability that forged a deeper bond between the prince and his protector. The guard's role was not only to maintain security, but also to provide emotional support, and this was the first true glimpse of the weight Louis had been carrying alone. Louis admitted that he often stayed quiet at family gatherings, even when he wanted to join in games or conversations. He described the loneliness of feeling unseen, the frustration of wanting to express himself but feeling uncertain about whether he would be taken seriously. The guard nodded, acknowledging the challenge. He reminded Louis that his feelings mattered and that it was brave to voice them even when it felt difficult. The discussion continued for hours. Louis recounted the smallest details, the look in Camilla's son's eyes when he laughed at a joke, the way others sometimes followed that example, and the subtle social dynamics that made him feel isolated. The guard offered gentle guidance, helping Louis name his emotions: fear, anxiety, embarrassment, and frustration. Understanding and naming feelings is often a powerful tool for children, helping them make sense of experiences that might otherwise feel overwhelming. As the evening wore on, Louis' story revealed more than just fear. It revealed a deep yearning for fairness, safety, and respect. He wanted to be treated as an equal, to be heard, and to have his feelings acknowledged. He wanted the palace to feel like a place where he could be himself, not constantly on guard or anxious about judgment. The guard assured him that these desires were valid and that together they could find ways to navigate the challenges ahead. Louis' vulnerability also allowed the guard to reflect on the broader situation. He realized that the young prince's fear was a signal that the environment needed adjustment, not a weakness on Louis' part. There were structural and social factors contributing to the anxiety. The dynamics between children of different households, the pressures of maintaining royal appearances, and the subtle ways in which influence and behavior were communicated. Recognizing this, the guard began planning ways to protect Louis while encouraging him to grow in confidence. During the conversation, Louis described moments of courage he had shown, even in the face of fear. He had attended events despite feeling anxious, greeted guests politely, and followed instructions with care. These actions, while small, were proof of his resilience. The guard praised him, emphasizing that courage is not the absence of fear but the ability to act despite it. Louis' eyes brightened slightly, feeling understood and valued. By the end of the evening, a sense of relief had settled over the young prince. Speaking openly had lifted a weight he had carried for months. Though the fear itself had not disappeared, acknowledging it and receiving support had given him a sense of agency and hope. He now had someone he could trust completely, someone who would listen, understand, and act when necessary. This moment marked the beginning of a turning point in Louis' young life. In the days that followed, the palace staff and the guard worked quietly to implement subtle changes. Louis was given more support during events, ensuring he felt secure in the presence of those who made him anxious. They created safe spaces where he could retreat when needed, and they encouraged him to speak whenever he felt uncomfortable. These adjustments, though small, had a significant impact on the young prince's confidence and emotional well-being. Louis also began practicing small strategies on his own. He learned to take deep breaths, remind himself of the adults who were there to support him, and find quiet moments to regain composure. Slowly, he began to feel a sense of control over situations that had previously left him feeling helpless. These early steps toward self-assurance were critical, providing a foundation for future resilience and confidence. The conversation with the guard remained a cherished memory for Louis. It reminded him that he was not alone, that sharing fears is a form of strength, and that even in the most formal and structured environments, emotional honesty could create meaningful change. For the guard, it reinforced the importance of empathy, vigilance, and patience in guiding and protecting the young prince. Their bond deepened, rooted in trust and mutual respect, a partnership that would shape the way Louis faced challenges in the years to come. Through it all, the young prince's fear was no longer an invisible burden. It had been acknowledged, addressed, and met with understanding. While the road ahead would still have challenges, Louis had taken the first significant step toward confronting the source of his anxiety and finding the courage to navigate the complex dynamics of royal life. His experience highlighted the importance of listening, empathy, and support, showing that even those born into privilege are not immune to real emotional struggles. And so, Prince Louis, with the guidance of his trusted guard and the support of caring adults, began the process of transforming fear into awareness, anxiety into strategy, and uncertainty into resilience. The journey was only beginning, but the foundation had been laid for a future in which he could face his fears with confidence, knowing he had allies by his side. The days following Prince Louis' confession to his personal guard were both challenging and revealing. While the young prince had gained relief by sharing his fears, the situation was far from resolved. The royal household, structured and formal, had its own rhythms and expectations, and Louis' anxiety could not be erased overnight. Yet what emerged in this period was a turning point, not only for the young prince, but also for those who had long stood quietly by him, protecting and supporting him as best they could. For the guard, who had spent years maintaining composure and professionalism, the weight of the situation began to grow heavier. He had always prided himself on his ability to remain calm, unflinching, and reliable, no matter the circumstances. Throughout his career, he had faced complex threats, delicate negotiations, and the unpredictable nature of royal life. Yet, seeing a child of such tender age experience fear that was both constant and invisible in public shook him to his core. The young prince's vulnerability was profound, and for the first time in his career, he felt emotions he had carefully kept at bay: anger, sadness, and an almost overwhelming sense of responsibility. Each day, the guard watched as Louis navigated the halls of the palace. The young prince still put on a brave face in public, but subtle signs of unease were evident. He lingered near adults he trusted, glanced nervously toward spaces where Camilla's son might appear, and occasionally hesitated to join group activities he would have once entered with joy. Observing these behaviors ignited a protective instinct in the guard, one that could not be ignored. He felt a deep urge to shield Louis from discomfort and harm, yet he was acutely aware of the limitations of his role. Acting too forcefully could draw unwanted attention, but doing nothing left the child vulnerable. It was during one particularly tense moment that the guard finally reached his breaking point. The palace was hosting a gathering of close family and royal friends, an event meant to be celebratory and light-hearted. Louis, as always, was expected to participate and smile, to charm guests and fulfill the duties of his position. Yet from the moment he arrived, it was clear he was anxious. He hesitated at doorways, kept his gaze low, and only spoke when addressed directly. Camilla's son was present, moving through the room with an ease and confidence that seemed to dominate the space. The subtle dynamics between the children, the quiet power struggle, the unspoken judgments, were visible to anyone who knew how to look. The guard watched as Louis tried to navigate the room, offering small smiles, polite words, and careful movements. He noticed the tension in the young prince's shoulders, the way he clutched his hands, and the brief flashes of fear in his eyes whenever Camilla's son approached. At first, the guard simply followed, ready to intervene if necessary. But as the interactions unfolded, he felt an emotional surge he could no longer contain. Years of training, discipline, and restraint collided with the raw sight of a child in distress, and he felt tears welling in his eyes. The guard's breakdown was quiet, almost imperceptible at first. He turned slightly away, covering his face with his hand, a rare moment of vulnerability in a lifetime of stoic service. The emotions were overwhelming: anger at the unfairness of the situation, helplessness at the limits of his authority, and deep empathy for Louis, whose anxiety had become so visible. The royal staff nearby, though experienced and attentive, were surprised by the intensity of the reaction. To see someone who had always been composed, unwavering, and disciplined show such emotion was a rare and humbling moment. This emotional response had an immediate impact on Louis, though he did not fully understand it at the time. He sensed the guard's concern, felt the weight of his protective presence, and recognized that he was deeply cared for. It was a silent reassurance, a message without words that he was not alone. Though the guard's composure had faltered, the bond between protector and prince had strengthened, forming an unspoken promise that the young boy's well-being would always be prioritized, no matter the circumstances. The breakdown also served as a wake-up call for senior aides and members of the royal household. Until this point, Louis' anxiety had been acknowledged privately, but the depth of the situation had not been fully grasped by all. Seeing the guard, an adult who had spent years in service and who was trained to manage crises calmly, display such raw emotion highlighted the seriousness of the young prince's experience. Meetings were held, strategies were discussed, and plans were made to ensure Louis' safety and emotional comfort during future events. It was a quiet recognition that the emotional well-being of children in the royal household was just as important as protocol, tradition, and appearances. Louis himself was beginning to understand the power of support and advocacy. Though he still felt fear in certain situations, he began to realize that having someone who truly understood and would act in his interest made a significant difference. The guard's emotional display, rather than frightening him, reinforced the idea that his feelings were valid and worthy of attention. He began to speak more openly about his concerns, practicing strategies to express himself respectfully and confidently when situations became uncomfortable. The palace began to implement subtle changes. Louis was given trusted companions during events, opportunities to step away if overwhelmed, and gentle guidance to navigate interactions that had previously caused anxiety. The adults around him were careful to monitor situations without drawing attention, ensuring that the young prince could feel safe while still participating in the life of the court. These measures were not dramatic or publicly visible, but for Louis, they made the environment more manageable and allowed him to regain a sense of control. At the same time, the guard continued to act as a steady presence, offering quiet reassurance, guidance, and protection. He helped Louis practice coping techniques, like taking deep breaths, focusing on familiar faces, and reminding himself of the support available to him. The emotional breakdown had humanized the guard in Louis' eyes, showing that even adults could feel deeply, and that vulnerability could coexist with strength. This understanding strengthened their bond and helped Louis feel more confident in expressing his emotions. The situation also prompted conversations among the adults about the dynamics between the children in the royal household. While it was natural for children to experience disagreements or competition, the subtle patterns of behavior that contributed to Louis' anxiety required attention. The adults recognized that a child's perception of safety, respect, and fairness is critical to their development, and that small actions could have significant emotional impacts. These discussions led to more thoughtful guidance, teaching both children empathy, communication, and respect for one another's feelings. Over time, Louis began to demonstrate small but meaningful progress. He participated more willingly in family activities, approached interactions with careful but confident steps, and gradually learned to manage his anxiety with the support of trusted adults. Though he still experienced fear in certain situations, he developed resilience, strategies for coping, and a deeper understanding of himself. The emotional breakdown of the guard, once a moment of vulnerability, became a turning point that allowed for real growth, reflection, and change. The bond between the young prince and his guard became a cornerstone of this process. They shared quiet conversations, walked together through the palace gardens, and practiced ways to handle anxiety in public settings. Louis learned that seeking help was not a weakness, but a sign of strength and courage. The guard, in turn, found renewed purpose in his role, understanding that protecting a child's emotional well-being was as important as any duty he had performed in his long career. The experiences of these days revealed the complexity of royal life for children. Even in a world of privilege, history, and tradition, the emotional experiences of a young prince were real and deeply human. Fear, anxiety, and the need for understanding transcended status, reminding all involved that every child, regardless of title or lineage, requires compassion, patience, and guidance. Louis' journey became a quiet lesson for the household, that emotional honesty, empathy, and support are not luxuries, but necessities for healthy development. Through these challenges, Louis continued to grow. He learned to recognize the subtle signs of fear within himself, to articulate his feelings, and to trust the adults who were committed to helping him navigate the complexities of his world. The guard's emotional response, though difficult to witness at first, became a source of reassurance and inspiration. It showed that feelings matter, that vulnerability can coexist with strength, and that true support often requires emotional honesty from those who care. By the end of this period, a new rhythm had emerged. Louis was still cautious in some situations, but he was no longer paralyzed by fear. He had allies, strategies, and a growing sense of confidence that allowed him to navigate events more smoothly. The guard remained a steadfast presence, his own emotional journey intertwined with the young prince's growth. Together, they demonstrated the importance of trust, empathy, and perseverance, and laid the groundwork for future challenges to be met with courage and understanding. In essence, these days marked a critical phase in Louis' development. The emotional breakdown of his guard, though initially shocking, highlighted the depth of care and commitment that surrounded him. It reinforced the idea that even those trained for composure and resilience could be deeply affected by the well-being of a child they had sworn to protect. And for Louis, it offered a powerful lesson, that he was not alone, that his fears were acknowledged, and that with support, patience, and courage, he could begin to face even the most intimidating challenges with confidence. The young prince's journey during this period was not just about confronting fear. It was about understanding the value of support, the significance of emotional honesty, and the power of resilience. Every small victory, every step toward confidence, was a testament to the careful guidance, empathy, and patience of those around him. And while the road ahead would continue to present challenges, Louis had taken critical steps toward facing them with courage, self-awareness, and the knowledge that he was never truly alone. In the days following the emotional breakdown of the guard, the palace atmosphere shifted. In subtle but important ways, everyone around Prince Louis became more aware of his feelings, his fears, and his need for support. What had once been quiet unease transformed into a situation that was addressed with care, attention, and thoughtfulness. The young prince, though still facing challenges, began to feel the effects of these changes, slowly finding confidence and comfort in his environment. Louis' daily routine became a little more manageable. During formal gatherings, he was assigned trusted companions, including the guard and a few attentive aides who had been carefully briefed on his needs. Their presence allowed him to participate in events without the constant fear of being caught off guard. Simple measures, like giving him the choice to step aside when overwhelmed or providing quiet spaces where he could regain composure, had a significant impact. Louis began to realize that he did not need to carry his anxiety alone, and that it was okay to seek help when needed. The young prince also learned to recognize and manage his emotions in new ways. He practiced deep breathing when he felt anxious, quietly reminded himself of the adults he trusted, and focused on familiar routines that brought comfort. These small strategies gave him a sense of control over situations that had once seemed frightening. Over time, he discovered that taking these small steps allowed him to participate more fully in events, engage with others, and enjoy moments that he had previously avoided. One of the most important changes was how Louis approached interactions with Camilla's son. Previously, he had reacted with anxiety, retreating or staying silent in the presence of the other child. Now, with guidance and support, he began to experiment with different ways of responding. Sometimes this meant politely excusing himself from a conversation. Other times it meant taking a deep breath and speaking confidently when necessary. While he did not yet feel entirely comfortable, these steps marked significant progress. Each small success built upon the last, creating a foundation of resilience and self-assurance. The emotional bond between Louis and his guard remained a central part of his growth. They shared quiet walks in the gardens, conversations in private chambers, and moments of reassurance during events. The guard became not only a protector, but also a mentor, helping the young prince develop emotional skills and coping mechanisms that would serve him well throughout his life. The trust between them deepened, giving Louis the confidence to express his feelings and face difficult situations with courage. At the same time, the palace staff and family members continued to observe and support Louis. They noticed the subtle improvements in his demeanor, the way he engaged with others, and the moments of confidence that began to appear. While progress was gradual, each step forward was celebrated quietly, reinforcing the importance of patience, encouragement, and understanding in nurturing a child's growth. The household learned that even in an environment as formal and structured as a royal palace, emotional care and empathy were essential for a child's development. Louis' experiences also prompted discussions about fairness, respect, and kindness among the children in the royal household. While competition and rivalry are natural among children, adults began to encourage more positive interactions, teaching empathy, communication, and understanding. Through these efforts, Louis began to see that he could influence situations in small but meaningful ways. By expressing his feelings calmly, setting boundaries, and seeking support, he learned that he did not need to be controlled by fear. The young prince's confidence grew steadily. He started participating more actively in lessons, games, and family gatherings. Though he still felt anxious at times, He developed the ability to manage these feelings and make thoughtful decisions about how to respond. Each day brought new challenges, but also new opportunities for growth. Louis discovered that courage was not the absence of fear, but the ability to act despite it. One particularly memorable moment came during a garden event where Camilla's son was present. Previously, Louis might have withdrawn or avoided interaction entirely. This time, however, he took a measured approach. With his guard nearby, he greeted the other child politely, maintained calm composure, and engaged in conversation on his terms. Though the interaction was brief, it marked a turning point. Louis realized that he could face situations that had once intimidated him and emerge with confidence intact. The experience reinforced the value of preparation, support, and self-belief, lessons that would remain with him for years to come. As Louis continued to grow, the palace environment itself began to reflect his progress. Events were planned with greater sensitivity to the needs of all children present, ensuring that interactions were positive and inclusive. Adults remained vigilant but supportive, guiding the children with care while allowing them space to develop independence and resilience. These changes benefited not only Louis, but also the entire household, fostering a more empathetic and nurturing atmosphere. The emotional journey also strengthened family relationships. Louis' parents became more attuned to his needs, recognizing the importance of listening, validating feelings, and offering support without judgment. They celebrated his small victories, encouraged his independence, and acknowledged his courage in facing challenges. This nurturing approach allowed Louis to feel both loved and respected, reinforcing his sense of security within the royal family. Throughout this period, Louis' personal growth was remarkable. He developed a greater understanding of himself, his emotions, and his responses to stress. He learned that it was okay to feel fear, that expressing vulnerability could lead to positive change, and that relying on trusted adults was a sign of strength rather than weakness. These lessons, though gained through difficulty, became an essential part of his character, shaping the young prince into a more thoughtful, empathetic, and resilient individual. The guard, who had once experienced a moment of emotional breakdown, found renewed purpose in his role. He realized that protecting the young prince was about more than physical safety. It was about emotional support, guidance, and mentorship. The bond between them became a model of trust, demonstrating that care, empathy, and patience can have a lasting impact on a child's life. The guard's steadfast presence allowed Louis to explore challenges confidently, knowing that he was supported every step of the way. Over time, Louis' confidence began to influence others around him. His interactions with peers became more positive, his engagement in activities more enthusiastic, and his sense of self-worth more evident. The changes were subtle but powerful, reflecting the effectiveness of consistent support, empathy, and guidance. The young prince had learned to navigate his fears, understand his emotions, and approach challenges with resilience, lessons that would shape his development far beyond childhood. The journey also highlighted the importance of acknowledging and addressing emotional well-being, even in environments where appearances and tradition are highly valued. Louis' experiences showed that children, regardless of status, benefit from understanding, patience, and support. By addressing his fears thoughtfully and compassionately, the palace demonstrated that emotional care is an essential part of nurturing confident, resilient individuals. In the final months of this period, Louis experienced moments of genuine joy and freedom that had previously been rare. He laughed more openly during family gatherings, engaged enthusiastically in games, and participated in lessons with curiosity and interest. Though challenges remained, he faced them with greater confidence and self-awareness, empowered by the support of the adults around him. Each success, no matter how small, reinforced his belief in his own abilities and the value of seeking help when needed. The young prince's transformation was also evident in his approach to challenges beyond personal interactions. He began to take initiative in learning, exploring new skills, and participating in creative activities with enthusiasm. The growth in confidence extended to his relationships with peers, his sense of responsibility, and his ability to navigate social situations thoughtfully. Louis had discovered that fear could be managed, that challenges could be overcome, and that courage often begins with small, deliberate steps. By the end of this journey, Prince Louis had achieved a remarkable level of emotional maturity for his age. He had confronted his fears, learned to communicate his feelings, and developed strategies for coping with anxiety. The palace environment, shaped by empathy, understanding, and careful guidance, allowed him to thrive while still respecting the structures and traditions of royal life. The bond between Louis and his guard remained a central source of strength, a reminder that support, patience, and trust are essential in navigating life's challenges. Ultimately, the story of Prince Louis, fear and growth serves as a powerful example of resilience, courage, and the transformative power of support. Even in the structured, high-pressure world of royalty, the experiences of a young child are real, profound, and deserving of attention. Through careful guidance, understanding, and emotional support, Louis learned that fear does not define him, and that with trust, patience, and courage, he can face challenges and emerge stronger. The young prince's journey, though difficult at times, ended with a sense of hope, confidence, and empowerment. He had learned valuable lessons about himself, about trust, and about the importance of emotional honesty. The palace had become a place where he could grow, explore, and thrive, supported by those who truly cared for his well-being. And while life would continue to present challenges, Louis had gained the tools, the understanding, and the courage to face them with resilience and confidence. In the end, the experiences of this period left a lasting impression, not only on Louis but also on the adults around him. They had witnessed the power of empathy, the importance of listening, and the difference that support and understanding can make in a child's life. The journey had transformed the young prince, strengthened the bonds within the household, and provided lessons that would guide them all in the years to come. Louis, once fearful and anxious, emerged stronger, more self-aware, and ready to face the future with courage and determination.